The sun was a fist in the sky, beating down on the bleached land. Hannah could feel its relentless weight pressing the breath from her lungs, baking the moisture from her skin until it felt like sun-cured leather stretched taut over bone. The sand, pale as ash, shimmered and danced with phantom water that never materialized. It had been 3 days, maybe 4. Time had melted like tallow in the heat, running together into a single, agonizing now. Her horse, Silas, had died yesterday morning, its eyes rolling back in a final, desperate agony that mirrored her own. She had stumbled away from the carcass, the flies already buzzing, the stink a heavy shroud in the still air. Now, even the flies seemed to have given up on her, finding no moisture left to covet. Only the vultures remained, patient, circling specks against the vast, indifferent blue. Their shadows, when they drifted across the sand, felt like a chill hand, a promise of the end. She lay on her back, the sand scorching through her thin dress, watching them. They were beautiful, in a terrible way, efficient and perfectly adapted to this unforgiving world. Unlike her, she had thought herself strong. John had always said she was, praising her resilience after the fever took their first child, after the wagon train they started with splintered and fell away like dry rot, after every setback on the long, cruel road west. Resilience. It felt like a cruel joke now, a word without meaning under this sun. John was gone. Ambush, quick, brutal, senseless. She had managed to slip away in the chaos, hidden by dust and twilight. Silas panicked, but alive then. She had ridden for what felt like days, aimlessly, desperately, putting distance between herself and the horror, distance that had led her here, to this burning emptiness. Her canteen was empty, rattling its dry, dusty echo. Her lips were cracked, her tongue thick and swollen. Every breath was a rasping scrape in her raw throat. She closed her eyes, picturing water. A clear mountain stream from her childhood, the icy shock of it on her skin. The deep, cool well at the farm John had dreamed of building. The dreams were fading, blurring into the harsh reality of the sand, and the heat and the patient, circling shapes above. This was it. The end of the trail, the end of Hannah. A sound cut through the haze of her despair. Not the buzzing of flies, not the whisper of the wind that sometimes stirred the sand devils, not the dry rustle of unseen things. A rhythmic thudding. Hoofbeats. Her eyes fluttered open. At first, she saw nothing but the wavy distortion of the heat, the sky still impossibly blue, the vultures still high above. Then, on the horizon, a shape detached itself from the shimmering heat haze, a horse, and on its back, a rider. Hope, sharp and sudden as a knife thrust, pierced through her resignation. Help, salvation. But as the shape grew clearer, the hope twisted into something else, something cold and hard in her gut. The rider was not a white man. His silhouette was lean, distinct against the sky. The way he sat his horse, the animal itself, smaller, wearier than Silas had been, but moving with an easy, tireless grace, spoke of a different world entirely. A world she had only heard about in hushed, fearful tones around campfires. A Comanche. Stories flooded her mind, tales of brutality, of scalping, of captivity worse than death. The very word was synonymous with terror for most settlers. Her hand instinctively went to the small, useless pistol tucked into her belt, its weight a bitter joke. Against a warrior on horseback, it was a child's toy. Fear, pure and visceral, replaced the dull ache of despair. Had she traded a slow, quiet death for a swift, violent one? Or something far, far worse? The rider approached, his pace steady, unhurried. He made no sound beyond the hoofbeats, no call, no shout. He simply came. As he drew closer, details emerged. Dark skin, the color of polished wood, long braided hair that caught the sunlight, minimal clothing, practical for the heat. His face, when she could finally make it out, was unreadable, cast in shadow by the brim of what looked like a worn felt hat, unusual for a Comanche in the tales, but real enough before her eyes. He carried a rifle across his lap, held with casual readiness. He reined in his horse a dozen yards away, the animal breathing easily, flank unmarked by sweat. He sat perfectly still, observing her. His eyes, dark and sharp, scanned her, taking in the dead horse behind her, the vultures above, her parched form on the ground. Hannah tried to push herself up, a pathetic attempt at dignity or defense, but her limbs were leaden, unresponsive. She managed only a weak, shaky hand raised against the sun, a gesture of helplessness, maybe even a plea. He did not dismount immediately. The silence stretched, thick with tension, and the hum of insects she hadn't noticed before. What was he waiting for? Was this some kind of cruel game? Would he simply ride away and leave her to the vultures? The fear was paralyzing, but beneath it, a flicker of something else. Curiosity, a strange, detached assessment? His gaze didn't seem cruel, only examining. Finally, he swung a leg over his horse's back and dismounted with fluid grace. He was taller than she expected, lean and muscled. He moved towards her slowly, deliberately. Hannah braced herself, closing her eyes for a moment. But the expected blow, the rough hand, never came. A shadow fell over her face, cool and blessed. She opened her eyes. He was standing over her, looking down. His expression was still unreadable. He knelt slowly, his movements careful, not threatening. He reached a hand towards her face, and Hannah flinched instinctively, a tiny sound escaping her dry lips. He paused, his hand hovering, then withdrew it slightly. Instead, he reached for a leather skin at his belt. He unstoppered it. The smell of water, clean and life-giving, hit her. It was overwhelming. He held the skin out to her. Hannah stared at it, then at his face. Was it a trick? Poison? But the desperation, the raw need, was too great. She lunged weakly for it, her trembling hands fumbling. He let her take it, his fingers brushing hers for a fleeting second. His skin was cool against her burning flesh. She brought the skin to her lips, tilting it back. The water was warm, tasting faintly of the skin it was carried in, but it was water. She drank, gulping it down greedily, some spilling onto her chin and neck, a sensation of impossible luxury. He waited, silent, while she drank, his gaze steady. When the immediate thirst was slaked, she lowered the skin, breathing heavily. Thank you," she croaked, the words rough and painful. He gave no sign that he understood. He simply watched her. He pointed a finger towards the dead horse, then made a gesture of riding and falling. Then he pointed at her, then at the sky, then down at the sand. He made a circling motion with his hand above his head, mimicking the vultures. It was clear. He understood her plight perfectly. He then pointed east, towards the rising sun, then made a cutting motion across his throat, followed by a gesture of many people. Danger, white people, settlers? She nodded, her understanding dawning, terrified. He knew the risks for them both. He stood up slowly. He looked at the horizon, then back at her. He pointed north, a single, decisive gesture. He tapped his own chest, then pointed at the ground at his feet, then made a sweeping motion with his hand. His land, his home. He was going north, into Comanche territory. And he was indicating that she would come with him. Fear warred with the desperate instinct for survival. Go with a Comanche warrior into his lands? It was the stuff of nightmares. But stay here? Death was certain, and soon. He offered a chance, however terrifying. He offered the water skin again. Hannah took another, slower drink, letting the liquid coat her tongue, her throat. He knelt again, pulling something from a pouch at his side. Dried meat. She hadn't realized how ravenous she was. He tore a piece off and offered it to her. She hesitated, then took it, tearing at it with her teeth. It was tough, salty, but tasted better than anything she had ever eaten. He didn't speak. He simply shared. This simple act, the water, the food, the quiet waiting, chipped away at the thick wall of fear she had built around him. This wasn't the monster of the stories. This was a man who had found a dying stranger and offered life. Why? She couldn't fathom it. He stood again. He made the gesture north, more insistently this time. Then he pointed at her, then back at his horse, patting its back. Ride with him. The horse looked strong, easily capable of carrying two, at least for a time. It was a long shot. But it was the only shot. Hannah looked at the vultures, still patiently circling. She looked at the dead horse, a symbol of her failed journey. She looked at the vast, empty, scorching desert stretching around her. Then she looked at the Comanche man, standing silent, waiting, offering a hand in the wilderness. She nodded. It was a small, jerky motion, but it was a surrender. A desperate gamble. A choice for life, whatever form it might take. He didn't smile, didn't show relief. He simply nodded back, a brief, almost imperceptible movement. He extended a hand, not to pull her up, but as a steadying point. Hannah pushed herself shakily to her feet, using his arm for balance for a moment. The world spun. He didn't let go until she was steady. He led his horse closer. He didn't offer to help her mount directly, instead showing her where to place her foot, how to grasp the mane. Her legs were weak, trembling. It took several attempts, her body aching with the effort. He watched patiently, occasionally adjusting the horse slightly. Finally, she was draped awkwardly across the animal's back, behind the small, worn saddle. He mounted in front of her, his movements economical and practiced. He settled himself, then without a word, clucked to the horse. It started forward, its gait smooth, unlike the jarring ride she had endured for days on Silas. She clung to his back, her face pressed against his worn hides. The smell was unfamiliar. Wood smoke, horse, sweat, something else earthy and wild. It wasn't unpleasant, just alien. They rode north under the scorching sun. He held the reins loosely, his body relaxed, perfectly balanced on the horse. Hannah clung to him, exhaustion finally claiming her. The fear hadn't vanished, but it was dulled by fatigue and the sheer relief of movement, of not being alone and waiting to die. She drifted in and out of consciousness, the rhythmic thud of the horse's hooves on the sand, a strange lullaby. When she awoke properly, the sun was lower, painting the sky in brutal shades of orange and purple. They had reached a place where the sand began to give way to rock and sparse, hardy scrub. They were following a dry wash, the ground harder here. He stopped the horse near a cluster of boulders. He dismounted first, then reached up, helping her slide down. Her legs crumpled beneath her. He caught her, steadying her, his grip firm. He lowered her gently to the ground in the shade of the rocks. She leaned back against the rough stone, grateful for its relative coolness. He knelt beside her again. He offered water. She drank slower this time, savoring it. Then he offered more dried meat. He ate some himself, tearing strips with his teeth, his movements economic. He pointed to her mouth, then his, making a chewing motion, simple, clear. Silence fell between them again, but it felt different now. Less charged with fear, more with uncertainty and weariness. He looked at the sky, judging the light. He looked at the surrounding terrain, his eyes missing nothing. He was assessing, planning. He spoke for the first time, a low, guttural sound. "Tatanka," he said, tapping his chest. Hannah stared at him, his name, a offering of sorts. "Hannah," she replied, pointing to herself. He nodded slowly, repeating the name, his pronunciation careful, slightly accented. "Han-na." He stood up and began gathering dry brush and twigs. He built a small fire in a protected spot between the rocks. It was small, smokeless, designed for cooking, not signaling. He took a small pot from his saddlebag, filled it with water from his skin, and added some dried roots and plants he took from another pouch. He set the pot over the fire. The smell, as it began to warm, was earthy, slightly bitter, but promised nourishment. He sat opposite her across the small fire, cross-legged, watching the pot. He didn't stare, but his gaze was observant. Hannah watched him in return. Without the glare of the sun and the immediate threat of death, she could see him more clearly. His face was lean, sharp planes and angles. There were faint scars near his eye and on his arm. A warrior's marks? His hands, resting on his knees, were strong, the fingers long. He emanated a quiet power, a deep connection to this land. He was not what the stories had painted. Not a mindless savage. He was competent, respectful, in his silent way. When the stew was ready, he used a wooden ladle to scoop some into a carved bowl he took from his bag. He offered it to her first. Hannah took it, the warmth comforting. The stew was thin, but filling, tasting of earth and sun and something faintly sweet. She ate slowly, regaining strength. He ate from the pot with the ladle, watching the darkening landscape as he did. When they finished, he carefully extinguished the fire, burying the ashes with sand, leaving no trace. He spread a worn blanket on the sand near the rocks. He indicated she should lie there. Then he settled himself a short distance away, wrapped in another blanket, his rifle across his lap. He was providing shelter, food, protection. Why? The question circled in her mind, unanswered. She lay down, the sand still warm beneath the blanket. The stars began to emerge, brilliant in the clear desert sky, a million tiny points of light against the velvety blackness. Away from the constant, blinding sun, the desert at night was different, cooler, quieter, but still vast and imposing. She watched Tatanka. He seemed to be watching the darkness, listening to the sounds of the night. He was a sentinel in this alien world. She should be terrified, but exhaustion and a strange sense of fragile safety settled over her. She had faced certain death and been saved by the one person she had been taught to fear above all others. It broke the world she knew into pieces. Over the next few days they traveled. Tatanka set a steady pace, moving purposefully north. He knew the land intimately. He found water in hidden springs she would never have seen, read the signs of animals, navigated by the sun and stars with effortless skill. Hannah followed, still weak but slowly regaining her strength. Communication remained minimal. A gesture, a few broken words, mostly on his part, names for things: water, food, horse, sun, moon, rock, trail. He taught her through action and necessity. He showed her how to conserve water, how to read the slight changes in the sand and rock, how to sit on the horse to ease the strain on them both. She learned Tatanka was patient. He never rushed her, never showed frustration with her slowness or ignorance. He was quiet, observant, and possessed a dignity that transcended language. She watched him, learning that the stories were lies, or at least, incomplete and cruel distortions. This man, Tatanka, was not a savage. He was a master of his world, capable of both great skill and unexpected compassion. One evening, they stopped near a small mesa. As the sun set, Tatanka sat on a rock facing west. He began to sing, a low melodic chant that seemed to rise from the earth itself. It was mournful, beautiful, entirely alien to her ears. It spoke of loss, of connection to the land, of reverence. He wasn't singing to her, but beside her, sharing a part of himself she hadn't known existed. Hannah listened, captivated, a knot of grief in her own chest loosening slightly at the universality of the sorrow in the song. It was the first time she had felt a connection to another human being since John died, however indirect. She began to talk to him, tentatively at first, telling him about the farm John had wanted, about their lost child, about the journey west, the hopes and the crushing losses. She didn't know how much he understood, but he listened. He watched her face, his dark eyes steady, and she felt heard in a way she hadn't been able to articulate before, even to herself. The vast silence of the desert seemed to absorb her words, carrying them away, lightening her burden. Sometimes he would respond with a gesture, a shared glance, a single word that showed he grasped the essence of her pain or her memories. "Child," he said one night, pointing to the stars, then drawing a small circle over his heart. Loss, but also connection, memory held close. It was a profound moment of understanding between two people who spoke different languages, came from warring worlds. They continued north. The landscape grew slightly less barren, with more scrub brush, hardy cacti, and the occasional stunted tree. They saw signs of other people now, old trails, discarded remnants of camps. Tatanka grew more cautious, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon. They were getting closer to his territory, but also, perhaps, to areas frequented by others. One afternoon they were riding through a shallow canyon when Tatanka abruptly stopped. His hand went to his rifle. Hannah followed his gaze. 3 riders were approaching from the north, coming down the canyon towards them. White men, settlers, outlaws. Tatanka looked at her, his face grim. He spoke, his voice low and urgent. "Hide." He pointed to a narrow crevice in the canyon wall. "Stay, quiet." Fear, cold and sharp, returned. She trusted Tatanka, but she knew the brutal reality of the world they lived in. A white woman, alone with a Comanche? There was only one story that told, and it wasn't the one she was living. She slid off the horse, her legs still shaky. Tatanka led the horse quickly to the crevice, pushing it into the shadow. "Stay," he repeated, looking directly into her eyes. His gaze was intense, commanding. "Wait." He melted away from the horse, moving silently towards the mouth of the crevice, rifle ready. Hannah squeezed herself into the deepest part of the shadow. behind the horse, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. She could hear the approaching riders now, the clatter of their gear, the casual sound of their voices. "See anything, Cal?" one of the voices drawled. "Dust up ahead," another voice, rough and hard, replied. "Could be Injuns. Keep your eyes peeled." Hannah pressed herself against the rock, praying they wouldn't see the horse, wouldn't see the crevice. She could hear their horses' hooves now, closer, closer. "Hold up," the voice called. Cal said. "Trail gets mighty fresh right here, like 2 horses came through, maybe 3. Panic flared. They had seen the tracks. "See anything?" the first voice asked. "Nothin', but these tracks ain't old, and they lead right into this canyon." Silence stretched, thick with suspicion. Hannah could almost feel their eyes scanning the canyon walls. "Look there," a third voice exclaimed, closer now. "Scratch marks on that rock, and, hell, is that a Comanche pony hid back in there?" They had found the crevice. Hannah whimpered softly, clamping a hand over her mouth. The voices were right outside now. "Well now," Cal's voice was low, dangerous. "Looky what we have here." Tatanka stepped out of the shadows, rifle held ready, facing the 3 men who sat on their horses at the mouth of the crevice. His face was impassive, but his eyes were hard as flint. "Comanche dog," the first man snarled, raising his own rifle. "What you hidin' in there?" "Go," Tatanka said, his voice quiet but carrying. "Not yours." "Ain't yours neither," Cal sneered. "Probably stole that horse. And what else you got tucked away? Maybe a white woman? Heard some stories." Hannah froze. The stories. They were already writing this one, and it wasn't her truth. "No white woman," Tatanka said, his gaze unwavering. "It was a lie, a shield." "We'll see about that," Cal said, starting to dismount. "Don't move, Redskin, or I'll put you down right here." This was the moment. Hannah had to choose. Stay hidden, and maybe Tatanka could talk his way out, or fight, which meant certain death for him against 3 armed men, and then likely capture or death for her. Or... She took a deep, shaky breath. "Stop," she cried, her voice trembling but loud enough to echo slightly in the canyon. She stepped out of the crevice, emerging from the shadows to stand beside Tatanka. 3 sets of eyes snapped to her, disbelief, then shock, then a complex mixture of lust and righteous anger crossed their faces. "Well, I'll be damned," Cal said, his eyes raking over her. "A white woman, just like I thought. See? Knew he had her." "He didn't have me," Hannah said, her voice stronger now, fueled by a surge of defiance she hadn't known she possessed. She stood straighter, pushing aside the fear. "He saved my life." Cal laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Saved your life? Looks more like he took you captive, woman." "Don't you worry, we'll get you away from this savage." He started to advance, rifle still aimed loosely at Tatanka. "No." Hannah stepped slightly in front of Tatanka, a foolish, instinctive gesture. "You don't understand. My horse died. My husband, gone. I was dying out there. He found me. He gave me water, food. He brought me here." The 3 men exchanged glances. Skepticism warred with confusion. It wasn't the story they expected. "She's lying, Cal," the third man said. "Probably Stockholm Syndrome or something. Or he put a spell on her." "Yeah, she's been with him too long," the first man agreed. "Lost her mind." "She ain't lying," Tatanka said, his voice flat, eyes on Cal. "She spoke truth. You ride on." "Truth?" Cal scoffed. "You expect us to believe a Comanche warrior found a white woman dying in the desert and just helped her, without touching a hair on her head? What kind of fool you take us for?" His gaze lingered on Hannah in a way that made her skin crawl. The true threat wasn't Tatanka, it was these men, and the ugliness of their assumptions. "I'm not lying," Hannah repeated, her voice steady now. "He has shown me more kindness than any white man has since John died." Cal's face darkened. "Sounds like he turned your head, woman. Get away from him." He took another step. Tatanka raised his rifle slowly, aiming it at Cal's chest. "You leave, now." The air crackled with tension. 3 against 1. The odds were terrible. But Tatanka stood his ground, his loyalty clear, and Hannah stood beside him. "You ain't gonna shoot us, Redskin," Cal sneered, though a flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. "Not with the woman standing right there." "I shoot," Tatanka said, his voice colder than the desert night, "to protect." This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about protecting the fragile bond they had forged, the truth of the unexpected kindness that had saved her. It was about challenging the ingrained prejudice that these men embodied. Cal hesitated, weighing the risk. Tatanka was known as a skilled warrior. Even taking one down might cost them dearly. And the woman, she was a complication, a witness. He looked at his companions, who seemed less eager to press the issue now that rifles were truly raised. All right, Cal said, slowly raising his hands slightly, though he kept his rifle gripped tight. Hold on, no need for shootin', we just came to check. Seein' as how she's all right. He paused, his eyes still narrowed, assessing. He didn't believe her, not truly. But he saw the resolve in Tatanka's stance, the surprising defiance in Hannah. We'll just be on our way, Cal said, backing up towards his horse. But this ain't the end of it. Folks hear about this, they ain't gonna like it. A white woman runnin' with a Comanche. You mark my words. We mark nothing from you, Tatanka said. He didn't lower his rifle until the three men had mounted their horses and turned back the way they came, riding off down the canyon, frequently looking back. Silence returned, heavy with the aftermath. Hannah's knees were shaking. She hadn't realized how much tension she had been holding until it began to drain away, leaving her weak. Tatanka slowly lowered his rifle. He turned to her, his expression softened slightly, a flicker of something in his eyes. Respect? Relief? You, he said, a slight nod of his head. Brave. Hannah managed a weak smile. You too, Tatanka. He put a hand on her shoulder, a brief, firm touch. It was the first time he had initiated physical contact beyond necessity. It spoke volumes. They waited until the sun was nearly gone before moving on, ensuring the settlers were well and truly gone. As they rode out of the canyon, heading north again, the bond between them felt different. It had been tested, challenged by the outside world, and it had held. They were not just two individuals sharing a journey, they were two people who had chosen to stand together against prejudice and fear. They rode for several more days, deeper into the lands Tatanka called home. The terrain became more varied, with rolling hills, scattered trees, and eventually, a hidden valley carved into the landscape. Lush grass grew there, fed by a clear stream that wound through the valley floor. It was a place of unexpected beauty, a sanctuary in the harsh wilderness. This was where Tatanka led her, his home, or at least, a place known and safe to him. There was no large village, only the remnants of old camps, fire rings long cold. He explained, in his quiet way, that his band moved often, following the buffalo, living lightly on the land. But this valley was a place of peace, a place to return to. He didn't take her to his people. Perhaps the encounter with the settlers had cemented his decision, recognizing the danger her presence among his band could bring, or perhaps it was a path he had already chosen. Instead, he chose to build a small, simple dwelling in the valley, near the stream. A wickiup, he called it, using saplings and hides. Hannah helped him as much as she could, her strength returning with consistent food and water. They worked together, two people building a home in a hidden valley, far from the world that had broken them both in different ways. It was hard work, physical and demanding, but it was grounding. Building something new, together, felt like an act of defiance against the loss and destruction they had both endured. Their communication grew, slowly, haltingly. She learned more Lakota words, he learned more English. They pointed, gestured, drew pictures in the dirt. Laughter came sometimes now, small, quiet moments of shared amusement over a mispronounced word or a clumsy attempt at a task. The silence was still there, but it was comfortable, companionable. Hannah told him about her life before the journey west, about the small moments of joy and peace she had known. Tatanka shared stories of his people, their ways, their beliefs. He spoke of the spirits of the land, the interconnectedness of all things. He taught her to see the desert not as an empty, hostile place, but as a living entity, full of subtle signs and hidden life. He showed her how to find edible plants, how to track game, how to make fire without matches. He taught her to live with the land, not just on it. In turn, she shared what she knew. Simple recipes, mending clothes, things from her world that were new and interesting to him. They learned from each other, two vastly different cultures meeting and blending in this secluded valley. The prejudice of the settlers, The fear she had carried for so long began to fade, replaced by respect, understanding, and a growing affection. Tatanka was everything the stories said Comanche weren't: gentle when he needed to be, fiercely protective, honorable, and kind. He had given her back her life, not just by saving her from the desert, but by showing her that goodness existed in the most unexpected places, and that her own strength was still there, waiting to be found. One evening, sitting by their small fire, the stars bright overhead, Hannah looked at Tatanka. He was watching the flames, his face thoughtful. The silence between them was full, comfortable. "Why?" she asked softly, the question she had held for so long finally finding its voice. "Why did you help me? I was a white woman, your people." "The stories." Tatanka turned his head, his dark eyes meeting hers. He was silent for a long moment, considering. "You were dying," he said simply. "But you could have just left me, or—" She couldn't bring herself to say the rest. "Could have," he agreed. "Saw the birds, knew you would not live, my heart, it told me." He tapped his chest, "Not to leave." "Your heart?" He nodded. "Sometimes, the path is not the path of the tribe. The path of the heart is strong." He looked away, back at the fire. "Saw you, alone, lost. Like something I knew." He didn't elaborate, and Hannah didn't press. She understood. He had seen her suffering, seen a reflection of perhaps his own isolation or loss in her dying state, and his own humanity, his own heart, had compelled him to act against the expected norms of his world and hers. He had looked past the color of her skin, past the history of conflict between their peoples, and seen only another human being in desperate need. In that moment, sitting by the fire, in the quiet safety of the valley they were building together, Hannah felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. The grief for John, for her lost child, for the life that was supposed to be was still there, a dull ache, but it no longer consumed her. Tatanka hadn't replaced what she had lost, but he had helped her find a way to carry it, to build something new on the broken ground of her past. They stayed in the valley. It became their world. They lived simply, connected to the land, to each other. They were two people from different worlds, brought together by chance and desperation, in a vast, unforgiving land, who had found refuge and belonging in each other. The prejudices of the outside world still existed, but they were distant echoes here. In their hidden valley under the endless sky they had found a home, not just a place, but a shared existence built on resilience, respect, and the unexpected. Life-giving grace of kindness found in the heart of fear. The vultures still circled sometimes, but they were just birds now, part of the sky, no longer a symbol of her impending end. They were a reminder of how close she had come to being taken, and how far she had traveled, hand in hand with the man she had been taught to fear, into a life she had never imagined, a life built on the strong, quiet foundation of earned trust and shared hope.